Hey everyone, welcome back to Tuesday Tea with me, Alisha Bowker Mudrock. Today I have a dear friend and colleague, Michelle, with us. I'm so excited to have her on. This is going to be a very meaningful and important conversation. But Michelle and I met in a coaching program, and she is also a fellow therapist. She resides in my home state of California in Pasadena. She has her own practice and she loves working with folks to really find their best parts of themselves and really just help them grow and step into who they are meant to be. So if you're definitely in the California area, look her up. But she is an inspiration. I learned so much from her in our short time together, just in our coaching program. That was always like when she spoke, I always wanted to listen. And I'm just excited to have her here today. So thanks so much for being here, Michelle.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm very excited to be here, and it's such a great privilege to be a guest on your Tuesdays with Alicia.
Yeah, definitely.
Tuesday
More than
tea.
there. We love it. So I've been starting off just continuing this theme around leading lady energy. When you hear that phrase or term, sort of like who is that person? What comes to mind? And even more specifically, how does she show up in her relationships? Since you are a
Mhm.
relationship guru, like how does she
Yeah.
kind of show up in those spaces as well?
Yeah, when I think about a leading lady, I mean, first we just think about it like cinematically, right? I mean, the leading
Hmm.
lady, she takes up a good portion of the story. She takes up her space in the story.
Yeah,
And so, like one image that comes to mind actually is Rebecca from Ted Lasso. Like, she's this
love that.
strong,
She's
empowered woman,
Yes.
takes up
Yes.
space physically. I mean, she's a tall
She's
woman.
very tall.
And, she's not afraid to ask for what she needs in life and to go after what
Mm,
she needs in life. And she's not afraid to speak her mind. And so when I think about a leading lady in like our day-to-day life, it's somebody who isn't shrinking. It's somebody who is honoring themselves. It's somebody who's really clear about what they need and they want in life
yeah.
and I don't want to say unafraid to go after those things because I don't think there's anything wrong with being afraid sometimes,
No.
but can look that fear in the face and proceed in spite of those fears at times and be
Yes.
willing to tolerate the discomfort that comes with it because they truly believe that they are worth those things.
Yeah.
And so when I think about what does that look like in relationships, that's really about being your true, authentic self and everything that that means, which might mean sometimes you disappoint other people. It might mean
Mm,
that not everybody likes you, but
hmm.
it means you're taking up space and when you're showing up as your authentic self, then the relationships that stem from that are going to
Yeah.
be the most rewarding and connected relationships. And then those people can be the leading partners or the supporting roles in your life in ways that help you thrive. And then it becomes an interdependent thing, like it's mutual,
Mm,
right?
hmm.
If I'm
Hmm.
showing up as a leading lady in my most important relationships, the people that I'm showing up with are benefiting from that too.
Yeah. And I think it also can help encourage, I mean, if we're keeping with the theme of Rebecca, right? Like she encouraged a lot of the people in her world to start showing
Yeah,
up as the leading ladies and men and whoever's of their lives too, because
exactly.
we cannot be anyone else and no one
Yeah.
else can be us. And so just for us to shine, I think that there's that oh, my words. It's been a day. The like a misnomer that, oh, if you're the star, everyone else has to just be back here. Now, in my storyline, yes, you're the supporting cast to me, but you're still the star of your life. And if
Yeah.
you're not showing up 100%, then that hurts me as the supporting cast to you, right? So it's this
Yeah.
very like kind of heady description, but I think it's how do we show up and think about ourselves because if we're living for others and their storylines only, it hurts them in the long run and ultimately really hurts us
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
right? Maybe not as obvious at first, but over
Mhm.
time, that can definitely show up those cracks in big ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I was drawn to the coaching world in addition to providing therapy, because I like the idea of somebody not really already having to struggle with dysfunction or being stuck in
Hmm.
their lives, or maybe they are stuck, but they're not really struggling with dysfunction. But it's really like, how do you just become the best version of yourself?
Yes.
And I find that going to this point of like Rebecca like lifting other people, I like the saying like a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yep.
And so when I think about my personal relationships, especially with other women, I definitely want to, like, I don't look at any other woman as competition. I want us
Mm,
all to rise up. And as a leading lady in my personal relationships, I do have a lot of friends that kind of sort of seek that out from me. And I love being in that role because I think
yeah.
we'll both benefit if we're all engaging in our world with confidence and clarity and connection.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the primary obstacles or challenges that maybe you hear from clients or that you've experienced personally or friends of why it's so hard to show up as the leading lady and maybe even just in certain relationships? Like
Hmm.
perhaps in some areas you're like, yeah, I got this, but what's the disconnect for folks
Hmm.
that you know, in your opinion, that where that makes that really challenging to do in certain spaces?
Yeah, I think patriarchy for one.
Just that.
A lot of conditioning that
Yes.
we are taught as women from a very young age to be attuned to the needs of others at the expense of our own.
Yes.
And there is no way to be a leading lady and to ignore what you need and want in life. And
No.
so I think a lot of it's just cultural conditioning. And then you
Hmm.
add to that familial conditioning, which is, of
Yeah.
course, based in part on cultural conditioning.
Right.
But, if I was going to distill it even more, I think staying small has to do with our own sense of unworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not worthy of goodness, and if I'm not worthy of love, if I'm not worthy of acceptance just because of who I am, then I'm going to either stay small, I'm going to engage in people pleasing, I'm going to be a perfectionist, I'm going to really hustle in all of these ways to
Yep.
get my needs met because I don't otherwise believe I'm worthy of it.
Right.
And that is a very tenuous place to be because those,
Mhm.
if we're always hustling, then as soon as that gets taken away or a relationship ends, it's now because I failed at any of those things. And I've really come to characterize those kinds of behaviors, perfectionism, people pleasing, accommodating. It's really, it's really about control. It's
Yeah.
about trying to control the outcomes so that I don't get rejected, I don't
Yeah.
feel abandoned. And so, but we relinquish so much of ourselves and our sense of self in that process.
Right.
And
And
so,
in the end, it's like worse than just
yeah,
getting rejected by someone and moving
yeah,
on to a healthier someone.
yeah.
Right.
And so becoming a lead, and then there's also like the tolerance of discomfort because becoming a
Mm,
leading lady means being okay with losing people,
yeah.
being okay with rejection,
Yeah.
being okay with people judging you, being okay with people criticizing you, and
Yeah.
knowing that if that's what's happening, those are not your people.
Right.
Those are not your co-stars and supporting staff or
Right.
supporting actors,
Staff,
right?
cast, whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 And but if at some point we learned that we weren't going to be okay, that rejection meant we wouldn't be taken care of, or it was a reflection of us,
Yes.
then we're going to work all the harder to make sure that those things don't happen, even though we ultimately don't have control over those things.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
as a result, continue to shrink ourselves and make ourselves small.
Mm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. These are all such poignant pieces of, I think, where and when folks have a hard time stepping or claiming that role. And I think that worth conversation is one I think we'll always continue to have. I don't know that if it was so easy to crack the code, we would have just figured it out already. But that's definitely like the whole first part of my book. The whole first step is, and it's come up in so many different conversations because it's so true. Like if your self-worth is not there,
Mm,
then you could pretend all day, but like you're not actually owning or believing that you have a voice or have anything to say or can do it or whatever else. And I think unfortunately the saddest part of that is one, yes, we're also conditioned in various avenues of our society today to believe we don't have that worth, but two, also to believe that we don't actually have anything to want. And
mm,
when you're constantly just living your life thinking you're wanting something, but it's really driven by everyone else's
mm,
agendas and
mhm,
storylines and their visions,
mhm,
it's so unfulfilling. Like even the
mm,
people that say, "No, I love doing this," right? Like maybe you never realize how unfulfilling it is, but like
mhm,
you're not fulfilled, right? And it's just sad to be on the other side of that, not perfectly, but just have gotten past a lot of that, and it's like maddening, and it makes me angry to see people who are
mhm,
still just subscribing um to this life that is so shallow and unfulfilling. And again, being a leading lady also doesn't mean you have to be famous. It doesn't mean you have to have your own company. It doesn't mean you have to not want, you have to want to like do all these crazy things. It's just even within whatever your perfect like picture of how you show up and who's around you is, but it's like really being clear on like you are the guiding force for that, and you're in
mm,
touch with your feelings, you're in touch with your needs and wants, you're in touch of when there's disconnect and how you are choosing to resolve that, not just like giving it up and doing it. You know what
mhm,
you like, you know what you don't like. Life isn't always about just what we want, but I'm clear on when I'm going outside of that, or I'm clear on when I'm compromising, or instead of it just being this autopilot thing that we wake up one day and we're like, what happened? you
yeah.
know
Well, that's a good point. I think so many of us do end up in autopilot. And when we are in autopilot, we lose intention. And I recently had an experience where somebody described this phenomenon in the way of saying, as Americans or in our culture, or however we want to look at it, we have an intention deficit disorder. And if we're
Ah,
not setting intentions for our life based on what we need and want, then our lives are going to take us rather than us taking charge in our
yes.
lives. And we
Yes.
have to be intentional. But when we're in that autopilot, we don't always notice
No.
that what we're doing, right? And we may not make that distinction that my needs are not the same as like my
Mm-hmm.
partner's, or my
Mm-hmm.
wants aren't the same, and we merge. And there's sort of that cliche dynamic where a partner will say, well, where do you want to go out for dinner? And
Yes.
the partner might respond, I don't care, we'll go anywhere. And then it's only when the first partner suggests something that's
And
totally
they're like,
not
oh,
what
I
the,
do care.
oh,
I
I
don't
don't,
want that at
yeah,
all.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I think again, sometimes we don't even know what we're doing
Yeah.
until something really puts it on the surface, and we're like, oh, wait, I actually have, I will tell you, Alicia, 90% of the clients that I work with, when we start talking about needs and wants, my clients have no idea, because they have
Yeah.
been living based on the needs of wants. Their care, I mean, I work with a lot of couples, so it's often, but not always, it's often the female partner in the couple that's sort of more focused on the relational needs. But I do have couples where that's more in the male role, and
Yeah.
it's just as painful and just as hard and confusing for them, for
Yeah.
any of us,
Yeah.
to put all of our eggs in the basket of taking care of everybody else's needs and completely ignoring our own. And so often I get that response when we talk about, what is it you need? What is it you want? And people say, I
Can't
have
say.
no clue. I have no
Yeah.
clue. I mean, they can maybe name it in abstract terms, but they have no idea. They're so used to living for the other
Being
person.
told. It being told
Yeah.
to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels risky. It feels really risky. I know in my previous relationship, for me to actually sit with my needs and then acknowledge that they weren't getting met.
Oof. Oof. I got
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
chills. This is hard. It's hard. Yeah.
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 And I realized as that relationship was ending that at some point I had to make a choice to either lose my partner or lose myself. And if
Yeah.
I was going to stay connected with my needs, that meant I had to lose my partner, and I wasn't ready to do that. And so now that I'm no longer with that person, I am able to really tune into what I need and want. And I have really stepped into the role of leading lady in all areas of
Mm,
my life, in my business,
mm-hmm,
in my personal life. I think I've always been that in my friendships. And
mm-hmm.
now I'm really that for myself. Like I'm the leading
Wow,
lady for myself.
that's so powerful.
I'm going to be a Rebecca, but the maybe like the most healed version of Rebecca.
I love that. I know. I was like, she still
Yeah,
has
yeah,
some
we all
things,
do. We
but
all do.
we
And I
all do.
think that's so important to really
It
highlight, right?
is.
Because there's
Yeah.
no destination, there's no finish line to cross.
No.
Life is hard, life's messy. As soon
Yeah.
as you kind of get some healing around one thing, there's something
You're
else.
like, oh God,
But
that over
but what
there.
does that process
Yeah.
look like coming at it from a leading lady
Yes.
role versus a supporting lady role?
Yes. And it can feel much more empowering. I think we feel more equipped to even think about doing it. And it gives more of like a scaffolding of how it's done, right?
Mhm.
Because I do
Yeah,
think like
yeah,
our vision, our goals, our scripts, our agendas, they're going to change in different seasons as they should, but it's not as jarring or frightening to maybe get more in that like learner role again, or to kind of be in that
mm-hmm.
recalibrating place, or to figure out how we're going to level up a little bit here or get a little uncomfortable here. When we have the evidence, we can do it, and we
Mm-hmm.
have the system and
Yeah,
that anchor of belief in ourselves and
yeah.
whoever that tribe looks like around us too,
Mm-hmm.
knowing we're kind of all working for that same good for all of us.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's so helpful. And I think that's why also even just we only were like had what like four classes, 8 days essentially together. But I think for a lot of the folks in that group, we became so connected and have stayed in touch because we we were there for each other, working for our common goals, but like there to support each other too. And it was this very
Yeah.
real thing with like really powerhouse people who will probably, if you talk to them, all have their own like moments. But in that collective space, it felt like we could all really show up as our
Yeah.
best selves because it was a safe space to do so, right? And then we can
Mhm,
go deep, we
mhm,
can get real, we can make those connections. And I think that's something that is missed
mhm.
if we're not really sharing ourselves with the world. Like people are
Yeah,
missing out on that, and you're missing out on potential connections because we're not able to like see that energy and participate in that if we're,
mm,
staying quiet or small or not even showing up to the class or not even taking the
yeah.
risk kind of thing.
Yeah, gosh, Alicia, it's such a good point because, so often, I mean, because my whole focus is on relationship and connection in my clinical practice, most of the people that come to me are lamenting that they don't have the deep, meaningful connections that they want, either with their
Mm,
partners or with other people in their lives. And what they might not realize is we cannot be deeply connected with anybody else if we are not deeply connected with ourselves. So if
yeah.
we have parts of ourselves that we don't like, parts of ourselves that we are suppressing or repressing, parts of ourselves that we feel like if I show this to the world, I won't be accepted. As long as we have those parts that we are not in connection with ourselves, it's going to be impossible to feel deeply connected with anybody else. And that also means like finding other people that have that too, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so much of the work that I do isn't just about how do we connect with other people. It's how do I connect within
Yeah.
first? How do we,
Right.
it's
Right.
within and between. I
Yeah.
talk a lot about within and between
Yeah. Yeah.
and helping people take vulnerable risks to show the parts of
Hmm.
themselves that they maybe learned a long time ago. I'm too much or I'm not enough or I'm a
Yeah.
failure or all of the negative beliefs so many of us carry around. And if somebody
Mm,
only saw those parts of us, they would reject us. It's actually that's sort of the, if we talk about Brene Brown and the difference between fitting in and belonging, right?
yep.
Fitting in means hiding those parts. Belonging means I can show those parts and still feel accepted and belonging.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I with with writing a book and then putting it out into the world, um, I I'm my own worst critic, and I'm also such a snob when it comes to reading. So I've like already written all of the bad reviews, and like I'm like, oh well, my really smart friends will be like, this is trash, or like my other friend over there is gonna. And again, they are not. They're my friends. But like in my head, I'm like, this isn't, I mean, it's not, I feel like I have to have all these like asterisks about what it is, what it isn't, and whatever else. The fact I like did it is amazing to me because
Mm-hmm.
I get in my own way all the time. So even just what I wrote about, but like relearning it in this space, but like if I'm not connected to like what what's good in there, what I'm putting out, and like it's so hard. I feel so overwhelmed just in the last week of the feedback I've gotten
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like I'm like, oh, this isn't for me. I don't know what you're talking about. Like it's so humbling and beautiful, but there is like been this disconnect of being able to receive it because I feel like I'm still like there's some weird like shame thing I have around. It's not, I mean, it's not like gonna be on the Pulitzer like and logically it's like just I don't even know, I'm like talking out loud for the first time. It's like all a big mess, but I'm proud of myself for doing it. I think it's gonna start feeling easier to receive it over time,
Uh-huh.
but it's just such a vulnerable thing to put out there
Yeah.
into a world of like brilliant humans who I love, who I'm like, they have high standards, and like the strangers I don't care about. It's mostly the people
Yeah.
I know that I
Yeah.
feel the most about.
Yeah.
But just the outpouring of just support and like reflection of like, oh my God, like you did this thing. I'm like, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. That's a big deal. Like, so
Yeah.
it's
What does the leading lady say about it?
yeah. So it's just been this hard, like, but what you're saying is if that connection point to yourself, if that little block or whatever is there, and I can't step into that fully, it is hard to
Hmm.
feel as connected to the experience in certain ways
Yes.
as though I'd
Exactly.
like to be, because
Yeah.
I know where I'm still like working on my stuff too.
Yeah.
I just felt like that was like a very poignant example that's happening right now in my life. Where every day I'm a mix of like, sometimes I just want to cry because I'm like, I feel so happy and like loved, and sometimes I want to cry because I'm like, oh, what did I do? And like, that's like it's been an
Yeah,
emotional.
but it's being bold and doing things in the face of your fear. And that's the
Yes,
leading lady, right? It's
yes,
not saying I'm not going to be scared to do this.
right,
It's that
exactly,
I'm going to do it in spite of my fears. And that is the role of a leading lady.
exactly. And the goal is not to also like I mean, who doesn't want to like feel good about themselves? But the point of writing is I think there's something important in there that hopefully will help at least one person, right? And so that's more the point. And for me to have not shared it felt like a bigger
Mhm.
risk than
Yes.
to potentially get some bad feedback or potentially feel kind of nervous or embarrassed or whatever. And so
Yeah.
I think that's where when you can channel that, it's possible, but it doesn't come without a lot of different feelings.
Yeah.
And each new iteration of a version of that is learning it and relearning it again for the first time. So
Hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of a quote I heard somebody say, somebody I follow their podcasts, and I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of when you choose to dim your light, you rob other people of the opportunity to benefit from it.
yes, yes,
And so, yeah, it's like you could have not written this, right?
yep,
But if you hadn't written it, then there are people that would have been able to benefit from all that you have to offer.
yeah,
And so just not, when Brene, I think she says, don't, don't listen to the haters because you're not a jackass whisperer.
I love that.
And
Yeah, yeah,
and I once had, I think it was like some coaching book or something I read. It was, and sort of to challenge some of these fears around negative feedback. They said go find your favorite author on Amazon and go look up the negative reviews. And so I
yeah,
looked up Brene Brown, and she's got a shit ton, I hope it's okay, shit
yeah,
ton of
of course.
negative
Yeah,
reviews. And
yeah,
people, here's an example of somebody who I think lives like a leading lady, and people call her a narcissist
yep, yep.
because she's
Or
big,
like
bold. I don't
racially
mean,
tone deaf, or I've
yeah,
seen so many things, just like she's not
yeah,
doing this perfectly, or she's not doing that right.
right,
Yeah,
right.
like so
It's
much
like
stuff.
we have to be perfect if we're going to play big. And
Right. But you're
like,
not. And I think she never promises to. So I
yeah,
love she's a great
yeah.
example of like just unapologetically still showing up in all her imperfections.
Yeah,
But
The
it's
Gift
very
of
uncomfortable.
Imperfections. That's her book.
Yes, yes. But it's very uncomfortable. So but I think it's such a great thing. And I think for as in your example too of leaving something that you really loved and cared about, but to realizing that spiting yourself is not worth holding on to something just because, and how you now are finding you can show up even bigger, even bolder, even better
Yeah,
for yourself and others and feel so much more full. And of
yeah.
course, when we to say yes to one thing is to say no to something else. So we're
Yeah,
always going to have to lose a little
yeah,
to gain something.
sure.
And that's hard. We don't like
Yeah.
loss. We don't like that feeling, but the loss isn't always bad. And
Mm.
the rewards when we're on track is always way, way, way more worth taking that than hanging on to the thing that we were afraid or felt uncomfortable to lose. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. My former partner and I, we cared about each other deeply. We loved each other deeply, and we came to the conclusion that neither one of us could live the lives that we wanted to live if we stayed together.
together. Yeah,
And that was, we had to lose the relationship in order to be able to
find
fully be
yourselves.
us. And
Yeah,
it's a hard decision to make, but I think if each of us wanted to be true to ourselves, there was no other possibility.
yeah. And I think sometimes being a leading lady, like you said, is not easy, but it is so worth it. And I have I never heard like I wish I hadn't shown up for
Mhm.
myself like that.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point. Like nobody ever says, I wish I hadn't shown up for myself, right?
no,
Even
no,
if doing so came with a lot of costs.
yeah, yeah,
And I don't, there's nothing that's cost free.
no. It's just it's a fairy tale. So
Mm,
I think
mm,
but again, I think if we are so in alignment with our vision, where we're headed, who we are, the no's and the like costs are so much easier to just do and spend
yeah,
because oh well that's just no it's like not no it's not in my plan like this is where I'm at not that's just noise like yeah it's
yeah,
pretty but
yeah.
like not interested right
Right.
so
Yeah. It
it
comes back
gets
to that
easier
intention. If we have those
yeah
intentions, if something is not in alignment with our intentions and values, then it makes it a lot easier. Maybe it makes it more simple. Maybe not easy, but more
right it might
simple. It's
still
like,
feel and
yeah,
exactly but it's a no-brainer answer
yes,
even if
exactly.
it still like comes with
Yeah,
emotions or whatever other feelings
yeah,
might be there
yeah.
so yeah.
Hmm.
Well, any final, I mean, we could just talk forever, but any final like big takeaways or thoughts or a recap of something you really want to leave folks with
Hmm.
as we're winding down.
I think really it comes down to self-compassion.
Hmm.
Because we're talking about being a leading lady and we're elevating the sort of this role in our lives. And yeah, like go out there and assert your needs and wants. And not all of us are ready to be in a leading lady role, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we haven't learned our lines yet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so as people want to step into or grow into that role, giving themselves grace if they're not there yet, or if they were in that role and then, something happened and they had to get their, what do they call it? Enacting their, like their stand-in, what's the
Their
name of this?
understudy.
Their understudy, so like just giving yourself grace and compassion. We're all just doing the best that we can. And
Yeah.
some days I feel like I'm a leading lady in my life, and other days I feel like I'm an extra, and I just
Mm.
have to work my way back into
Mm-hmm.
that role. But it's a practice, right?
Yep.
It's not
Yep.
like, oh, here I am, I'm there. It's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
daily practice
Yes.
that is based on our values and intentions and being true and authentic to ourselves.
I love it. Well,
Mm.
thank you so much, Michelle. Where can people find you? Is there anything you kind of want to let folks know about that you're doing or offering?
Yeah, well, as the clinical director and founder of the Center for Growth and Connection, based in Pasadena, California, my practice really focuses on relationships. We help couples and individuals in all areas of our relationship. And in addition to, I have a group practice with an associate that works for me and can see clients in California, but I am also licensed in Virginia and Washington, D.C.
Amazing.
And I also provide coaching. So while there are
Yeah.
some limitations around who I can see as a therapist, in my coaching capacity, if you are wanting to go from good to great, that's something I really love helping people do. If you feel like things are pretty good in your life, but you're not sure how to step into that leading lady role, that's certainly something that I love to be able to help people do. But you can find more information about my practice at centerforgrowthandconnection.com. There's information about myself and my associate who works for me, as well as a blog where we try and provide useful information that's relevant to people related to relationships and relationship functioning. And there's also associated Facebook and Instagram pages,
Oh,
which are always a
nice.
work in progress because I'm
Gosh.
learning how to be a leading lady in social media.
Oof, it is a whole thing.
Yes,
I'm in
it
a
is.
boot camp right now for vertical video making, and I'm
Oh
like,
boy.
people, this is why people do this for their full-time jobs. A lot of
Oh,
work,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, well, I'm feel like
This
such a
leading lady
millennial.
has more supporting roles now, or supporting actors
Staff.
helping me do
I
that.
love it.
Yes.
I love it. That is smart. I know. I'm like, something's going
Yeah.
to give eventually, but I'll commit to the 30 days and we'll see what
Right.
happens. Well, great. I will have all those links in the email as well. So you can just click on her picture and the little link and it'll take you to those websites. But
Great.
thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate
Alicia,
it. Such
a
a
lot of
great
fun.
conversation.
All right.
And I will see everyone next week. Have a good rest of your
Take care.
day.